Jason pulled himself up. All around Nico, the ground shifted. The grass withered, and the stones cracked as if something was moving in the earth beneath, trying to push its way through. "Give us Diocletian's scepter," Nico said. "We don't have time for games." "Games?" Cupid struck, slapping Nico sideways into a granite pedestal. "Love is no game. It's no flowery softness. It is hard work, a quest that never ends. It demands everything from you, especially the truth. Only then does it yield rewards." Jason retrieved his sword. If this invisible guy was love, Jason was beginning to think love was overrated. He liked Piper's version better. Considerate, kind, and beautiful. Aphrodite he could understand. Cupid seemed more like a thug, an enforcer. "Nico," he called. "What does this guy want from you?" "Tell him, Nico D'Angelo," Cupid said. "Tell him you are a coward, afraid of yourself and your feelings. Tell him the real reason you ran from Camp Half-Blood and why you are always alone." Nico let loose a guttural scream. The ground at his feet split open and skeletons crawled forth. Dead Romans with missing hands and caved-in skulls, cracked ribs, and jaws unhinged. Some were dressed in the remnants of togas. Others had glinting pieces of armor hanging off their chests. "Will you hide among the dead, as you always do?" Cupid taunted. Waves of darkness rolled off the son of Hades. When they hit Jason, he almost lost consciousness, overwhelmed by hatred and fear and shame. Images flashed through his mind. He saw Nico and his sister on a snowy cliff in Maine, Percy Jackson protecting them from a manticore. Percy's sword gleamed in the dark. He'd been the first demigod Nico had ever seen in action. Later, at Camp Half-Blood, Percy took Nico by the arm, promising to keep his sister Bianca safe. Nico believed him. Nico looked into his sea-green eyes and thought, how can he possibly fail? This is a real hero. He was Nico's favorite game, mythomagic, brought to life. Jason saw the moment when Percy returned and told Nico that Bianca was dead. Nico had screamed and called him a liar. He'd felt betrayed, but still, when the skeleton warriors attacked, he couldn't let them harm Percy. Nico had called on the earth to swallow them up, and then he'd run away, terrified of his own powers and his own emotions. Jason saw a dozen more scenes like this from Nico's point of view, and they left him stunned, unable to move or speak. Meanwhile, Nico's Roman skeletons surged forward and grappled with something invisible. The god struggled, flinging the dead aside, breaking off ribs and skulls, but the skeletons kept coming, pinning the god's arms. "Interesting," Cupid said. "Do you have the strength after all?" "I left Camp Half-Blood because of love," Nico said. "Annabeth, she..." "Still hiding," Cupid said, smashing another skeleton to pieces. "You do not have the strength." "Nico," Jason managed to say. "It's okay. I get it." Nico glanced over, pain and misery washing across his face. "No, you don't," he said. "There's no way you can understand. And so you run away again," Cupid chided. "From your friends, from yourself." "I don't have friends," Nico yelled. I left Camp Half-Blood because I don't belong. I'll never belong. The skeletons had Cupid pinned now, but the invisible god laughed so cruelly that Jason wanted to summon another bolt of lightning. Unfortunately, he doubted he had the strength. Leave him alone, Cupid, Jason croaked. This isn't... His voice failed. He wanted to say it wasn't Cupid's business, but he realized this was exactly Cupid's business. Something Favonius said kept buzzing in his ears. Are you shocked? The story of Psyche finally made sense to him. Why a mortal girl would be so afraid. Why she would risk breaking the rules to look the god of love in the face, because she feared he might be a monster. Psyche had been right. Cupid was a monster. Love was the most savage monster of all. Nico's voice was like broken glass. I wasn't in love with Annabeth. You were jealous of her, Jason said. That's why you didn't want to be around her. Especially why you didn't want to be around him. It makes total sense. All the fight and denial seemed to go out of Nico at once. The darkness subsided. The Roman dead collapsed into bones and crumpled to dust. I hated myself, Nico said. I hated Percy Jackson. Cupid became visible. A lean, muscular young man with snowy white wings, straight black hair, and a simple white frock and jeans. The bow and quiver slung over his shoulder were no toys. They were weapons of war. His eyes were as red as blood, as if every Valentine in the world had been squeezed dry, distilled into one poisonous mixture. His face was handsome, but also harsh, as difficult to look at as a spotlight. He watched Nico with satisfaction, as if he'd identified the exact spot for his next arrow to make a clean kill. I had a crush on Percy Jackson, Nico spat. That's the truth. That's the big secret. He glared at Cupid. Happy now? For the first time, Cupid's gaze seemed sympathetic. Oh, I wouldn't say love always makes you happy. His voice sounded smaller, much more human. Sometimes it makes you incredibly sad. But at least you've faced it now. That's the only way to conquer me. Cupid dissolved into the wind. On the ground where he stood lay an ivory staff 3 feet long, topped with a dark globe of polished marble about the size of a baseball, nestled on the backs of 3 gold Roman eagles. The scepter of Diocletian. Nico knelt and picked it up. He regarded Jason, as if waiting for an attack. If the others found out, Jason said, you'd have that many more people to back you up, and to unleash the fury of the gods on anybody who gives you trouble. Nico scowled. Jason still felt the resentment and anger rippling off him. But it's your call, Jason added. Your decision to share or not. I can only tell you, I don't feel that way anymore, Nico muttered. I mean, I gave up on Percy. I was young and impressionable, and I don't... His voice cracked, and Jason could tell the guy was about to get teary-eyed. Whether Nico had really given up on Percy or not, Jason could imagine what it had been like for Nico all those years, keeping a secret that would have been unthinkable to share in the 1940s, denying who he was, feeling completely alone, even more isolated than other demigods. Nico, he said gently, I've seen a lot of brave things. But what you just did, that was maybe the bravest. Nico looked up uncertainly. We should get back to the ship. Yeah, I can fly us. No, Nico said. This time we're shadow traveling. I've had enough of the winds for a while.